Hi, my name is Dan Other. I'm with the Missouri University of Science and Technology, and I'm excited to talk with you today about some of the essentials of the nurse engineer. So as I begin, let me share my slide deck and let's just get right into our presentation. Today I'm going to talk with you about the essentials of the nurse engineer, particularly the qualitative methodology applied to food systems and environmental engineering. Like I said, my name is Dan Other. I'm on the faculty of the Missouri University of Science and Technology. My co-author is Dr. Sarah Other, who's on the faculty of the Goldfarb School of Nursing at Barnes-Jewish College. If you'd like to follow the slides or get in touch, I'm available on X at Daniel Other. Let me give you a little bit of institutional context. Missouri University of Science and Technology is located in Rolla. We have just shy of 10,000 total students. About 5,500 of those are undergrad, about 1,500 are grad, about 300 faculty. Barnes-Jewish College at Goldfarb School of Nursing has about 400 undergrads and about 100 graduate students and 40 faculty. So we're talking a focused engineering school collaborated with a focused school of nursing. Today, I'm going to talk about some learning objectives, some background, the results and implications, and then I would be happy to hear from you further if you have any questions, and I'd be happy to answer those and follow up online. By the end of today's presentation, you should be able to describe the unique and shared traits at the interface of nursing and engineering, these two disciplines that actually share some things in common. We'll talk about the pedagogy of senior design course, where we introduce engineering students to qualitative research methods, things that engineers aren't that familiar with or aren't that accustomed to. And we did that as part of community-based participatory research. There's some lessons learned from the summaries of end of semester student surveys. And hopefully by the end of today's presentation, you'll be on a path to collaboration between environmental engineers and nurses. The goal is to co-design complex systems that the interface, like food, energy, water, things that are going to support sustainability, including local food production and consumption. Let's do a little bit of background and then hop into some of our results and implications. Now, most of us are familiar with the idea of I-shaped individuals, folks that drill down deeper in a particular discipline. And we're also familiar with broadening ourselves into T-shaped professionals, those that work in engineering but add on things like business and policy. But the National Science Foundation actually calls on us to do something more. They call on us to do something called Convergence Research, which is characterized as having two primary characteristics. First, convergence is a deep integration across disciplines. We're not talking multidisciplinary. We're not talking interdisciplinary. We're talking transdisciplinary, across disciplines, from one thing to another. Translate from English to another language, right? Not like kind of mix them back and forth, but actually create new frameworks and paradigms, perhaps even new disciplines. And then we're going to have research that's driven by a specific and compelling problem, in particular, a pressing societal need. Now, in the shape of a V, this is what we're thinking about as convergence research. Let's not blur what it is to be a nurse or what it is to be an engineer, but let's point them towards a common future. Now, artists understand this. It's called the vanishing point, this image here on the right. These are parallel lines, right? These are parallel lines on the floor in the building. But at the horizon, at the vanishing point, these lines seem to come together. And so it gives us a three-dimensional or a feeling from the future in a two-dimensional parallel image. The idea of convergence is very similar. We're not trying to get rid of what it is to be a nurse or an engineer. Instead, we're trying to point towards a common future. So we look at the kinds of things that nurses do. They're focused on empathy and assessment, and they produce theories. They focus on the patient, whether that's the individual, the family, the population, or the community. We compare that to engineering, which often focuses on math and models and produces things. Our goal is the public. Now, how does an engineer work? Well, we bend the future to our design. How does a nurse work? Well, the nurse bends themselves to the other person, to the patient, through empathy. And if we look at some nice language from a recent paper, what does the nurse engineer do? They work with comfort at the interface of the I-shaped discipline of engineering and the I-shaped discipline of nursing. They're at peace with the disquiet of latent variables, things that we know must be true but can't directly measure them. They know how to capture the known in models, describe perceived but not yet known, what we call known unknowns in theory, and then true unknowns, well, stochastics or conservative safety factors. And the nurse engineer should move effortlessly between the abstraction of math and the full presence of empathy, because convergence of engineering and nursing into a single profession means that the abstract and the fully present, the future that the engineer is trying to build, and the presence that the nurse is experiencing all come together for a sum that's greater than the parts. Now, nursing and engineering are similar yet different disciplines. Engineering, like a set of grapes, each grape part of a bunch, but each grape different. An electrical engineer is different than a chemical engineer. Nursing, on the other hand, is more like an orange. An orange is a whole. It has pieces inside it, but you don't think of eating a piece of an orange. You think about eating an orange. You might think about picking a single grape. So there are some similarities and differences between these professions. And what we're focused on, the I, the T, the V shape, is this idea of pioneers, guides, and translators. How do we develop the interface between these professions? What does it look like to help guide people in this space? And today, an example of a translator, somebody who actually is moving between one to the other to try to create the V-shaped discipline. So what are some of our results? Well, in this article, we report on materials that a nurse used to teach engineers about qualitative research. When you think qualitative research, think talking to people and listening to them. The engineers solicited feedback from interviews. We're going to talk about some of the data, sharing some of the students' comments on the strengths and weaknesses of this approach. But as we move forward, I want to take a moment to stop sharing the PowerPoint and share with you a brief video that was put together as part of this course. So I hope you'll enjoy this with me.
And then a lot of this also includes then, at the actual visiting, right? So this was, for example, we just went to Rodney Southard's farm, right? One of these cattle farmers. And then we went over to St. James and talked to Josh Stacy. And so at Public House. And so, it was that. So engineering as a discipline is all about using design to solve problems. So we got to figure out what the problem is. And the best way to understand the problem is to talk to the people living through the problem. So stakeholder analysis or learning how to go out and talk to people in the community is step one to any good design.
When Dan's environmental engineering students came out and we walked through the garden and they had a lot of questions and we talked about a lot of interesting things. And they did ask a lot of intelligent questions and they seemed like they were very interested. And I thought it was valuable for them and for me.
I would say as an environmental engineer, it's important to look at food systems because not only is it an issue of the environment, it's also an issue of public health, welfare, and safety. We have to make sure that the food we're producing is safe, both in terms of bacteria and any potential contaminants to the food and whether it's healthy and good for our citizens.
Well, the food system in Phelps County is a complex web. So there's a lot of interactions between the different stakeholders, whether it's producers, processors, and obviously the consumer, and then on the back end as well, waste management and government.
I think the biggest thing that I learned about the local food system was that the locally produced food is shipped out of the county rather than actually, processed here and then, served here to the communities. It's, shipped out, and then essentially a lot of the food that is here in the county is food that comes in from outside the county.
Chefs, they do take steps to reduce waste. And I was kind of surprised by that, but they said it's all about the money. They don't want to overproduce and then have to throw food away because that's money that they're throwing away.
Food insecurity is a mental state. It's not just about being hungry just for the weekend, but it's the continual nagging feeling that you're going to be hungry. It's not wanting to go home over the weekend knowing that you're not going to have any food.
There are resources here for people to access food in Phelps County. And there is a stigma associated with accessing those resources. So over the past few years, one of the things the students have realized it's okay to talk about being hungry, that food is systems, and that we kind of unearth and bring forward what are some of the impediments to people accessing the food that's here. That then puts us on the path to being able to solve those problems.
Definitely, since COVID happened, there's huge supply chain issues and everyone's complaining about inflation. Well, I think the ways to fix that is to fix the food system and make food more accessible to everybody. Is what we're doing the right way to do it? Or is there any ways that we could take this system, change it around and make it better for our citizens, make food more available, more sustainable, more accessible and healthier and easier?
So I think that video does a nice job of explaining how the students engage with the community. It shows some community speakers, it shows some student speakers, but ultimately the problem with the Phelps County food system we brought forward, it's not so much a deficit of the availability of food, it's partially poor food distribution, but also a lot of people not taking advantage of resources. And students learned important things like chefs. They take steps to reduce waste, and they were kind of surprised by that, but they said it was all about the money. So I think what you heard in that was that qualitative methods provide a rich contextual meaning, and some of the student feedback supports that. Here's a quote from a student in an open-ended result to the end of the semester survey. The strengths and weaknesses are both in how different this is than usual. We experienced a new side of design, qualitative, community-based participatory research, and the expectations for each part of the syllabus could use some refining. Like, let's make it a little bit easier to know how to get a good grade. I'm already doing this weird style of talking to people. I don't need a weird style of being graded. And so it's reasonable for students to want to see some standardization in learning objectives and grading for each part. But in particular, the students thought that the open-endedness, making sure that the work of what's expected is known, but bring in people like Sarah Other, who spoke to the class, it really works well. And so with that in mind, the time with Sarah was a great addition to the class. So the tone and content of this kind of feedback I would characterize as generally positive. The involvement of a recognized expert is highlighted as useful and important. And the students are comfortable to give some concrete suggestions for how to improve the course. What is the implications for bringing qualitative research methodology into a engineering design course? Well, in this current study, we specifically highlight the role of qualitative research, and the results support a couple of conclusions. First of all, students of environmental engineering seem to be open to instructions from nurses about how to perform qualitative research. There was a general tone of acceptance and desire to know more about it. And students of environmental engineering demonstrated how they could use these methods, and they actually uncovered some useful things. There's food in Phelps County, but not everybody accesses it. So there's some stigma associated with it. So an engineering design that focused on transportation or the presence of grocery stores or built those kinds of systems would be missing the mark. People in Phelps County, Missouri, avoid handouts. They're looking for opportunities to feed their own family. They're looking for opportunities to engage. That's really different. It's not good or bad, it's just really different. So more free food wouldn't be the way to get them food, but perhaps community gardens, perhaps licenses for extra hunting or extra fishing. Those would be angles that might play best with this particular population. So the results of this study support the conclusion that qualitative research is an essential skill of the nurse engineer, and it has a benefit for addressing all kinds of things like food systems. So I hope as we end, you're on a path to understanding collaborations between folks like environmental engineers and nurses when we try to co-design complex systems like the food, energy, water nexus to make it sustainable, like so that we can have local food production and consumption. It's helpful when we use convergence. Two disciplines working together for a future that they share. I'd be happy to follow up with any questions and answers. Get in touch with me on X, drop me an email. Thanks so much for your attention.